Made for Me, Chapter 53. Friday, December 17th, Lars said formally. He raised his glass of champagne to Ulrich and Johann, who joined him with their drinks in hand, and Danielle, who lifted her sparkling cider. This is the day to remember that the three of you have brought MRD to the top of the gold trading industry in Switzerland and London, and, by default, the world. Congratulations. The four clinked their glasses, laughed, and drank, not caring it was 10 in the morning as they consumed chocolate-covered strawberries and other delicacies Lars had brought in for the occasion. Danielle thought he looked exquisite in his gray herringbone suit, an azure blue tie with diagonal stripes, and a new haircut that was marginally shorter on the sides and a little longer on the top. Unfair, she thought to herself, but it was life. And this is for you, he said, handing an envelope to Ulrich, and you, giving Johann and Danielle theirs. Danielle smiled with appreciation while she felt like one of those marker balloons that floated above, chained down by a weight that was never seen, meant to keep her always in the same place. As she extended her right hand, she watched his eyes, which flicked to the ring on her fourth finger. As she sat among the three men, her colleagues and boss/former love, she felt a small movement inside her. At approximately 20 weeks, it was time. She held her glass very still. She set it down on the table, sure that no one had noticed. But Lars had caught it, for his eyes held concern. She nodded her head slightly, as though she were agreeing with Johann's comment about Christmas vacations. This led into Ulrich's thoughts for trading during the holiday, or lack thereof. When the phone rang, Lars ignored it, but shortly thereafter, a voice came through on the intercom. The woman apologized for interrupting. The woman apologized for interrupting the meeting, but an urgent call from the States had come through for Mrs. Grant. Danielle knew what the call meant. It was 2 a.m. in Oregon. Nothing good happened at 2 a.m. Danielle, in your office? Lars asked her, his tone even, but his eyes betraying all that he knew. She nodded and spoke to Ulrich. Please leave me some flexibility in the schedule. Danielle asked for Glenda to hold her phone calls, and she closed her office door. Danielle Grant. Danielle, it's Dr. Killen. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. Danielle put her left hand over her eyes, feeling the tears seep through unchecked. All she could do was nod. Her father, her hero, was gone, and he was never coming back. Danielle, I want you to know that his last words were of his love for you. Danielle could barely breathe. When she finally spoke, her voice was a hoarse whisper. I wish I'd been there to hold his hand. Your father said to tell you not to feel bad you weren't there. He said he was happy you were living your life. That's what he wanted. That obstinate, headstrong man that he was, still telling her what to do from his deathbed. Danielle didn't know how long she sat at her desk, her head in her hands, the tears falling, but she knew she had to regain her strength and make flight arrangements. She just needed one more minute to pull it together. A knock at the door went unanswered. She kept her head down as she heard the knob turn. Can I get you anything? It was Glenda. Danielle looked up. I need the earliest flight to Portland. I don't care what it costs. Just enough time for me to go home and pack. Can I get you a driver? Yes, please. And could you let Ulrich know that I'll need to leave for a week, maybe more or less? I'm not sure. Danielle didn't know the protocol for transferring clients to someone else's management, if the clients had to be notified or what. She mentioned this to Glenda, who said she'd take care of it. Danielle's ears were ringing and her head was pounding. It's just shock. The same thing had happened when her mom had died. Just breathe, breathe. She slowly rotated the chair to face the water. She hoped the view outside would help calm her, but an excruciating pain made her gasp and she doubled over in her chair, feeling as though a knife was being shoved in her side. She gripped the desk with her left hand as she heard the door open. Danielle? She fell forward, a vague pain in her forehead and the sound of screeching as the chair slipped backward. A part of her braced for her shoulder to hit the floor, but the hurt didn't come. Glenda! Lars shouted, his subsequent words incomprehensible because they were in German. Strong arms held her as she groaned when another slice of pain went through her. What's happening? He asked urgently. The baby, she said, and then her world went black. When Danielle woke, a nurse was putting another blanket over her. You were shivering, she said kindly in lightly accented English. Danielle tried to focus her eyes. She was on her back in a hospital room, her left arm hooked up to an IV. Above her, to the left, was a flat-screen television that was off. The blinds of the room were open, and outside, she saw snow falling in little specks. She remembered the phone call, her father, and the pain. Her right hand immediately went to her stomach. Her vital reading spiked, causing the nurse to look at the monitor and then back at her. "The baby is all right," the nurse said. "You went into shock. The doctor will be in shortly." Danielle didn't remember riding to the hospital, and she asked the nurse when she'd been admitted. "About 5 hours ago," she answered. "Tell me if you need anything for the pain in your head. You hit yourself pretty hard when you fell down." Danielle felt torn between relief at hearing the baby was unharmed and stress over not being able to leave for Oregon. Just then, a tall man in a white physician's uniform entered her room. His short gray hair, a stark contrast to his black metal glasses, reminding her of Johan. She was comforted by the similarity. He introduced himself and asked how she was feeling. "Queasy, but otherwise okay." "That's good. You hit your head hard enough to suffer a concussion, and your blood pressure dropped to the point where the baby went into arrest. You spent several hours in the ICU until you and the baby were stabilized. We tried to find the name of your obstetrician in your wallet, but couldn't. I'll be happy to call your doctor if you can provide me with that information." Danielle told him the woman's name and then asked him how long she'd need to remain in the hospital. "Another day, depending on your vitals," he answered. "You don't want to take any chances at this stage." She nodded. "I'll do my best." "You have a visitor waiting, too, actually, but the person who checked you in and provided your health information and gave us the picture of your overall situation is Lars Eagle. He asked to see you when you are ready." "Yes, he can come in," she answered immediately. Danielle told herself to remain calm as the door opened. Lars approached, looking every bit the managing director of a world-class investment bank. His eyes darted across her face, absorbing her overall appearance. "Thank you," she said, smiling faintly. Lars pulled the chair from under the side table and sat next to her. "You aren't going to thank me for long," he said seriously. "I had to do something today I didn't want to do, but in my defense, it was an accident, or rather, accidentally done." Danielle stared at him wide-eyed. The vitals on her screen jumped, and they both looked at the green monitor. "Danielle, this is non-negotiable," he said in his business tone. "You have to hear me out, so breathe deep and focus." "Okay, I'm breathing, but I want you to know that I'm grateful you caught me and checked me in." Lars took a breath. "You have no known relatives here, no guardian. I was able to use my relationship with the head of the hospital to get you admitted, but they wanted next of kin." He paused then. They were concerned about certain unforeseen circumstances, situations that would involve the baby. Danielle heard the pulsing of the monitor increase its speed. "I acknowledged I wasn't the father, and when they asked, I told him I did know his identity." Lars gently took her hand in his. "Andre didn't answer my call. I had to get in touch with Georgi to ask him to call me back." Danielle envisioned Georgi's fury at his son. "Thank you, by the way," he said, squeezing. "Andre said you called him several times, but that he didn't return the call. He also admitted he threw away your letter." "I kept my promise," she said faintly. She'd given Andre a chance, and he'd proved he was too immature to respond. "I know," Lars said, "and ironically, I had to have the conversation with him instead of you." "He's here now, down the hall in the reception area." The monitors on her vitals increased slightly. "What?" Lars touched the eternity ring he had given her, lightly circling the diamonds that stretched from one end to the other. "He's your closest family member," Lars said regretfully. "Technically, the closest living family member by virtue of being the father of your child. He's able to make decisions for you that I can't." Danielle felt sick. It wasn't right, not this way. "Was he surprised?" she asked through tears. Lars raised his eyebrows. "Catatonic is a word that would apply." "Did you tell him about all the other circumstances of the situation?" "I told him I had all the love for the baby you are carrying as if it was my own, because I thought of it as my own. He is fully aware of how much I love you. He also knows how I feel about parental guardianship and the necessity of having only one father, not two. Danielle waited. And? There was no and. I left him and am here with you. Danielle's heart twisted with all the love she felt for this wonderful man, but she had to keep those emotions buried deep now for the sake of her daughter. Lars waited a few moments, stroking her hand. Danielle, he's waiting to speak with you. She gripped him tightly, unwilling to let go. She felt all the self-pity and anger and regret for making the noble but hard choice. His thumb touched her ring, and he rubbed it knowingly. You opened this a little early, didn't you? I wanted you with me the moment you left, she admitted. Lars moved toward her, his cheek barely touching hers, and she felt his lips move as he spoke. And I'll still be loving you when I leave here. He brushed her cheek once, and she heard him inhale deeply, as though absorbing her scent up one last time. Her right hand curled around his neck, her lips next to his. And I'll keep my promises,